Sometimes dead is better. Hey, what's up, you guys? Nick at the Lost River Drive-In coming at you tonight to talk about something that we haven't talked about on this channel before, and that is going to be the Pet Sematary franchise. Now, as opposed to my franchise ranking videos that I have done before, this is only 3 movies, so I'm going to show the physical copy and talk about each movie one by one a little bit, give you my thoughts on it. I could do a little bit more intimate review with this since there are less movies in this franchise. I also want to say that this video idea was given to me not explicitly by this person, but Buddy Christian over on Christian Hannah Horror did a retrospective review of Pet Sematary last week. Also did a cover of the Ramones' Pet Sematary on his Patreon. And it got me back watching these movies because I hadn't watched them in a little bit, and it made me want to talk about the series as a whole. So we're going to rank them like I would do traditionally, but we're going to talk a little bit about each one a little more extensively than I do normally. And there are 3 movies, so my least favorite movie in the series is Pet Sematary 2. I know this movie has a lot of fans. I understand why. This is not a movie that I watch and simply think that it is absolutely awful. No, I just think that it pales in comparison to the other 2 movies. So basically, Pet Sematary 2 is about a kid named Jeff moving to Ludlow with his dad after his mom dies. His dad's a veterinarian. He's antagonized by a lot of kids in the town and becomes friends with a kid named Drew. Drew has this asshole stepdad, played by Clancy Brown, who does a fantastic job. Drew's stepdad ends up shooting and killing Drew's dog. Drew loved the dog, so Drew and Jeff decide to bury the dog in the pet cemetery, hoping the dog will come back. Well, the dog comes back, and as we know from these movies, the dog is not the same. And that is pretty much your basic plot of Pet Sematary 2. First, I want to talk about a couple things I like about this movie. I really like the soundtrack of this movie. I think that late 80s, early 90s was really a good sweet spot for some great soundtracks in movies, and this movie is no different. Very, very on point with the soundtrack. Mary Lambert came back to direct. She did the original, so it still has the same type of style and tone. You know, the gore, the kills, they're still exciting. They're still kind of in your face. The lore of Ludlow, Maine is still very ever present. It's got a very nice feel to it. Edward Furlong does absolutely awesome in this movie, and it's really cool to see a young Edward Furlong. Like I said, Clancy Brown, who plays Gus, is an absolute awesome asshole stepdad. And he plays that role to a T. If you had a dog that you were super close to when you were younger, this movie really hits you because, you know, Drew loved his dog. And we've all, I mean, after seeing these movies, I'm sure you've asked yourself before, like, I wonder if I were in the same position if I would do that. And I mean, after seeing the movies, you go, well, no, like, I don't want my dog coming back and killing me and my family. But at the same time, you're like, I mean, can I say bye though? Like, kind of hard. So I don't know. The things I don't like about it. For me, it seems like everybody else, a lot of the other acting is really subpar. There's a really weird dream sequence involving like a wolf head and sex that is super weird. It takes a little bit to get going, and I just feel like overall it's not interesting enough to me. There isn't enough there, emotional depth there for me to really feel like I did with the original. Those are my quick thoughts on Pet Sematary 2. I know the movie has its fans, and I appreciate that because this is not a terrible movie. When I look at the series as a whole, this comes in at number 3 for me. But again, if you are a fan of this movie, I encourage you to keep loving it, and I encourage you to speak about your love for this movie because don't let anybody else's opinion dictate how you feel about a movie. So that's Pet Sematary 2 at number 3. There's probably not going to be a lot of surprises from here on out. Number 2 is Pet Sematary, the remake from 2019. Basically, if you've seen the original Pet Sematary, you know what this is about. A family moves to Ludlow, Maine to get away from the big city, Boston. The dad's a doctor, and they have a young son, Gage, and a young daughter, Ellie, but she's a little bit older than Gage. Gage is a toddler. And this one, spoilers guys, Ellie is the one that dies, not Gage. and Lewis tries to bury her in the Pet Cemetery to bring her back. The things I like about Pet Sematary, the remake. First and foremost, I really like Jason Clarke in this movie. I really like John Lithgow. And I really like Amy Seimetz. I think that the three people, oh my gosh, how can I forget? Jete Lawrence. I absolutely loved Jete Lawrence in this movie. Mainly after she becomes, reanimated, essentially. She is super believable as like a zombified, demon-possessed little girl, and she plays it super well. I really enjoyed her in this movie. So the acting, first and foremost, is pretty damn spot on in this movie. The kills are awesome, and they kind of subvert your expectations in a couple ways. And one of those being Judd's death. There's a moment where they're like intentionally trying to get you to think they're going to do the same thing, and they don't. But then they do later on in like kind of a similar way, which was cool. Obviously subverting your expectations with Ellie dying and not Gage dying. And that's not really a spoiler because it was in the trailer, guys. We don't want to talk about that because you don't give away spoilers like that in a trailer. I really liked the atmosphere. I really, really liked the kills, the gore, the acting. And I think that the way the movie ends, and with the twist of it being Ellie, I liked those. I liked something different because if I want to watch the original, I'll watch the original. But you got to give me something new if you're going to do a remake. And I was really, really pleased with some of the new directions they took this in. Just because I thought it would be cool to see things a little bit differently. And it was. Things I don't like about Pet Sematary 2019. I really, really, really think that Zelda was handled super poorly. And that is a cardinal sin when it comes to Pet Sematary, because Zelda may be the most memorable character, arguably I think she is, in Pet Sematary. And it was just handled super poorly in this. She wasn't scary. You didn't feel the emotional depth, like that Rachel felt, Rachel was supposed to feel about what happened to her sister. You didn't really feel that. And so the whole Zelda angle fell flat on its face. They just completely jump into Ellie's dead, Ellie gets buried in the Pet Cemetery. There's no, you don't see the depth and despair that eats away at Lewis over weeks, over a few days or a week or whatever before he finally decides to do it. It's just like, well, might as well go do it. And I feel like they underutilized John Lithgow. They didn't give him much screen time, whereas in the original, got a ton of Judd. So I that was just kind of a bummer. But overall, I think it's a good movie. I think it is a good remake. I think it's misunderstood. We talked about that before, so I don't want to get into that. But yeah, there are positives and negatives to the movie, but I think there are more positives than negatives. So I like this movie. This comes in at number 2. And then the best one, it is the original Pet Sematary from '89. Look, this movie is great in so many ways. There isn't much I didn't like about this movie, although we can talk about the little girl that played Ellie and her acting. Pretty subpar in this movie. It doesn't drag the movie down that much though, because she's a kid actor. How many kid actors do we see throughout horror that are like that? Whether it's Alex Vincent in Child's Play, it's the kid from the Babadook. Oh, no, shut up. I just wanted to 1-2. Anyway, I would never hit a child, but just saying. Yeah, so, but aside from that, there's really nothing about this movie that's bad, in my opinion. This movie really kills me because growing up, I always had younger siblings, and it always hurt me to watch that, thinking about that happening to my younger sibling, what happens to Gage. Now that I am a parent, it hits completely different, and it is just absolutely brutal and painful to ever even imagine that happening to your child. And the way that the characters handle it, it is just, I love it. I love it. I mean, you believe that Lewis is just completely lost his mind. You believe that Rachel is just so grief-stricken she doesn't want to be alive anymore. I mean, you truly do believe that, and they really lean into that. This movie doesn't get enough credit for how deep it is emotionally, because it truly is deep. It's a very macabre movie. It's got a very macabre message, but the message is letting go. We don't control what happens in our lives all the time, but we have to accept it and let go. And that's a hard message for a lot of people. And as a parent, losing a child, I'm sure that I can't imagine. That would be terrible. And they really lean into that, and it's done super well. And I think the part that really kills me is seeing Gage's shoe in the middle of the road. That was just, I don't even like to talk about it because it really is emotional. It really does get to you. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Zelda. I mean, nightmare fuel. Nightmare fuel. That scared the absolute crap out of me as a kid. And it's still freaky. I mean, I am 26 years old and it still freaks me out. One of the scariest things in a horror movie that I had seen in my childhood. Zelda, just supremely evil and creepy. The little kid who plays Gage, surprisingly, you know, not terrible when he's reanimated. Not Oscar worthy, but not terrible. The kills, I already said the acting, the visuals, the moral of the story, the point of the movie, it's really driven home. And like I said, you're just thinking the whole time, like, would I do the same thing that Lewis did? And it's really hard. And my fiance and I had to talk about that the other night when we were watching it. Like, would you do that? I mean, it's hard. But overall, guys, Pet Sematary is one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, and I think that it is just beautifully directed by Mary Lambert. I think it is super well acted. I think it is original. I think it's emotionally deep. I think that it is just a very, very good movie. This is a horror classic. It is no surprise that it makes it as my number one. Like I said, there are only 3 movies, so there's not a ton to choose from, but Pet Sematary comes in at number 1. So that is how I would rank the Pet Sematary movies. I wanted to be a little bit more intimate with it. I wanted to talk about each movie a little bit, give you pros and cons, and let you know that there isn't a single movie in the series, albeit 3, that I feel is a bad movie. This is one of those series that's, you know, just pretty good. Like, the remake is pretty good. Pet Sematary 2 is okay. And the original is awesome. And it's fantastic. So that's how I feel about the Pet Sematary movies, guys. I'm sure you guys have seen them. I'm sure you've seen at least one of them. What did you guys think? Discuss in the comments down below. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Make sure to share on social. Share with your friends. I don't care. Get the word out there. I really appreciate it, guys. And can't wait to show you what we got coming next week. So, without further ado, I'm leaving. So this is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In. Pulling out.